Welcome back. Ram Anand here once again. I'm so excited today, and I have a very special person that I want to introduce to all of you today, all the viewers today, for the 3, 2, 1 Live Limitless with Suresh Verghis. Suresh is a leadership facilitator and a coach, and he is also the founder of Global Coach Resources LLP. And he is also a visiting faculty at the Great Lakes Institute of Management. And to give a little background information of Suresh, he was born in Chicago, US, and raised in India and educated globally, like all over the place. He has over 27 years of hands-on corporate experience leading and developing human resources in India and abroad as well. So he is so passionate about helping leaders at all levels and bring about lasting change in their behaviors to elevate performance and overall personal success. So I'm so happy to welcome Suresh Verghis to the show here. Suresh, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ram, and thank you for having this conversation.
Awesome, awesome. So as viewers, we all know that this interview is split into 3 sections. The first part, I'm going to ask 3 questions, very intriguing questions. I have prepared myself well in advance. I'm going to ask these questions to Suresh, and then I will ask him to share a few resources and a few tips and pieces of advice. Let's start with the first question. Suresh sir, how can leaders bring about lasting change in their behaviors? Because we have been talking about leadership all week and all the entire month we have been talking about it. My first question, because you have been working with leadership, my first question to you would be, how can leaders bring about lasting change in their behaviors?
Well, Ram, firstly, and you would have noticed this in what I described as my passion in the introduction. Firstly, as leaders, we need to have a will to change, a strong intention. And therefore, any change needs a resolute desire to move towards personal transformation. So you'd agree with me that leaders need to be willing to connect with the people, connect with the context, connect with the environment, as well as connect with the possible outcomes of any transaction. So leaders can also be coached to become much more self-aware in order to be able to enhance these skills. And by following a consistent path or process, they can make suitable tweaks in their style and in their approach, which is also bound to sustain. And that's a great starting point to bring about lasting change in their behaviors.
Fantastic, fantastic. So what sort of way or path can leaders follow to be able to make those changes last? Like we talked about lasting changes. So is there a specific path that you suggest?
Well, firstly, it's good to start building these skills as early as possible so that they're strong and they last. Now, I remember a time when I was 7 or 8 years old when my mother wanted me to, sell the backyard produce of tapioca or cassava, as we call it, on the sidewalk for about 40 paise or 60 paise a kilo. And I believe that taught me humility, respect, tiny trading lessons, dignity in labor, as well as dealing with the kids who were making fun of the whole thing, thinking it was a very funny thing. But now looking back, I believe those were my very, very first baby lessons in being able to start something really young. And the second thing is, I think it's important for us to understand our values. So that we can see, once we understand our values, we would be able to then understand others' values as a means to be able to align with them and build relationships. And the third thing, I think, is it's important to develop the skills of listening to connect, open questions, and being able to express in clear, concise, and complete terms. And this helps greatly in personal change. Understanding one's emotional competence, and either through an assessment or through feedback that can be gathered, is also extremely constructive. And it's also important to formulate certain action plans and follow through with sort of an accountability structure so that we are sure that we are planning on the change and making sure that we get the change that we want or we deserve.
You just mentioned listening to connect. That's a very interesting phrase, listening to connect. So how should uh, our viewers master this skill of listening to connect? Any
Well,
ideas on that?
sure. Well, listening to connect is what Dr. Judith Glaser, a neuroscientist, discovered by exploring about 500 companies, conversations in 500 companies worldwide. And what she said is that 9 out of 10 conversations fail to hit the mark. So that means that when those conversations were deconstructed through research, 9 conversations out of 10 were found to be visibly and sort of anecdotally low levels of connectivity. And failed to hit the mark simply means that people walked away with different views of the reality or what they had agreed upon. And so that's profoundly interesting because listening to connect was then found to be an essential internal action that all leaders need to make in or practice in all types of conversations. So, listening to connect, the way she puts it is listening to connect, not to judge, not to confirm, not to reject. And that is a way of listening to the other person with a focus on them, not on us. What are they saying? What are they trying to say? What are they thinking? What are they not saying? And it's about connecting to their world and exploring their world. It is bigger than listening to understand, because when you are listening to understand, you are actually listening to confirm what you know already. So, hence, listening to connect.
So active listening, like in other words, is it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. We
So
also include it as active listening, but yes, the new term, so to speak, is listening to connect, because then you connect to their world completely.
absolutely. See, it is mind-boggling to learn that 9 out of 10 times people are not even connecting and taking the wrong message out there, even though people are communicating. So people have been always talking about communicating well and listening, and listening to connect is really very interesting concept to understand.
It is,
Fantastic,
yes.
fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And Suresh, to go to the next section in this interview, I would love to ask you to share 1 or 2 pieces of advice or tips that you want to share with the viewers. We'd be very grateful.
Sure. So, in this context, there are two things that I'd like to share. One is about emotional competence. So, and I'd like to ask listeners, viewers, to even practice this. Now, in case you undergo an emotional experience and you feel that you want to be able to respond to it a bit differently, then it's good to be able to analyze 5 aspects of any emotional experience. The first is the trigger. That is followed by an interpretation that we make, which is immediately followed by an emotion that comes up. And then there's a behavior. It could be like shouting. And then there's an outcome, which could be a relationship has been, weakened. So if you feel that you want to work on this, then recall that incident and try and understand what was the interpretation that you made of that trigger, because you can't control the trigger. But what was the interpretation you made? And then what was the behavior that you made? Because these are the 2 things out of the 5 that can be controlled by us. And even if you miss the interpretation, you can at least control the behavior, keeping in mind the outcomes or the outcome that could happen. So that is one way by which you try and analyze your own emotional competence and emotional abilities. So that's one tip that I can share. The other tip that I can share is about listening to connect. So when we say listening to connect, it is about listening without judgment, being able to let go of judgment. And there is one practice that I tell my training participants and my coaches that they can follow, which is try and listen to someone who's very close to you for about 10 minutes without your mind wandering. And in case your mind wanders, bring it back and count how many times your mind wandered. So when you do that over a period of time, initially it might seem to be a little awkward, but when you do that over a period of time, you are attempting to bring down the number of times your mind has wandered. So it doesn't matter who's speaking to you or what the topic is. The focus is on improving your listening skills and being able to bring back your mind constantly and being able to bring down the number of incidences of the mind wandering is what will lead you to be able to listen, to connect more and more. And Dr. Judith Glaser says that you end up discovering new worlds, or the new world, or the world of the speaker, whoever it is. So these are two practices that I would recommend.
Absolutely mind-boggling, I would say. It was like a mini seminar that we are so grateful for you for sharing these two wonderful strategies. I would say these are not even teaching points; these are like strategies that we can start using right away.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I wish we will do one more interview where we can go a little more deeper into these topics.
Anytime. Anytime.
That will be great. So now we have come to the last part of this interview series, where we would be so grateful if you can share a key resource that you have found so useful, so valuable that you want to share with our readers, listeners and viewers today.
Sure. So since I've been talking about emotional competence and listening to connect, I would like to recommend a book by Dr. Judith Glaser, which is called Conversational Intelligence, How Great Leaders Build Trust and Get Extraordinary Results. It's available on Kindle, or it's available as a hard copy book, but it's a fantastic book. One doesn't need to read it cover to cover, but you can choose the chapters that you want, but it really gives you everything that you need to know to be able to build solid relationships, whether they are in organizations or whether they are personal relationships, simply by listening to connect. So that's a resource that I would like to recommend to viewers and listeners.
Can we have the name of the book and the author once again, please?
Yeah, so Dr. Judith Glaser is the name of the author, and the book is called Conversational Intelligence, How Great Leaders Build Trust and Get Extraordinary Results.
Fantastic. And now we have got this beautiful resource, useful resource, and I would like to thank you so much for joining us on the show. And I also know I have got a hint that you are writing, and soon you are going to be publishing your book as well. Let's go into that part later on. We will do a separate interview to figure out what your book is going to be about. But we all would like to be, in the loop when you get your first book out there. We'll all be ready for that. So with that, thank you so much for joining us on this show, and thank you for sharing these gems and golden nuggets of information today on the show and the resource as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ram. It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.